Hey guys, so I'm back for Flatwash version number 2, or Flatwash, let's try again. Um, and I'll try to make this relatively brief. I've been realizing some of my uh, videos or lessons are going pretty long, which maybe when I get to a point, if I ever get to a point that I have Patreon and YouTube, then there's full-length versions for the Patreon people, but something, I don't know, we'll see. I don't want to just leave it all on YouTube, and you guys can fast forward it if you don't want to see everything. Anyways, so flat washes. Tried to do them the last time, have learned a bunch, gone out and looked and learned a bunch. So let me show you a few different things. And I'll give you close-ups too. So this is flat wash, dry on dry, right? And this was done, two of them right next to each other, one with less pigment, one with more. And this was done dry on dry with a 30-degree angle. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate all of these in a little bit. Probably, I guess, one of the easiest. This is still on the board, but so this is wet on wet with a piece of paper that was not pre-stretched. All right, so what I did was I took a piece of paper, I divided it up so I can do a bunch of different washes, and then I wet the back, wet the front, put it on this board. It's okay, a little runny. And then the last one I did, and we'll show everyone, sorry for moving cameras, is this, which was a pre-stretched piece of paper, still here. You can see where it's stretched against the tape, and wet on wet. And this one I think was really nice. You can see this area here, that's a problem because capillary action is an amazing thing. I didn't push the tape down enough over here, so the tape being lifted a little bit in the capillary action pulled all the water with that ink in, or the pigment into it. Not bad. The wet on wet, again, sorry, but the wet on wet, not as flat. So there was a bigger chance of getting like valleys in that one, and you can see some of them, right? Of all of them, dry on dry seems to be, with a 30-degree angle, seems to be the way to go. So I'll show you how to do these. I'm going to be as quick as I can about this. This is going to be dry paper. So dry, I'm using a deep scarlet Daniel Smith watercolor, right? So that's the watercolor we're going to start with. Hopefully everything's, the last time I missed some of this stuff, hopefully everything's in focus. So we get some water and get started. So I want a nice, rich, pretty heavily pigmented. I'm going to take, there's actually some pigment on the end of the knot, on the end of the brush. I'm going to get that off of there without wasting it. All right. So the brush is pretty wet, pigment's pretty heavy, and we're off and running. The board's at a 30-degree angle. It's going to be back and forth relatively quickly, trying to maintain a bead, if you see the bead at the bottom. Right, I'm going to load the brush on a regular basis, so I've got the pigment at about the same level. This is, what is this, a number 12. And you can see how the angle really helps. So where I've messed up in the past is cleaning up these edges, because I don't want to get the paint back on the page on the edges. But as in the past, I've gotten too close to the edge and I've dried up some of the wash. So I'm just pulling, maybe pull that little bit out of there at the bottom. Nope, I'm not left-handed. Let's not even try that. That was just a attempt at disaster if I tried to do that with my left hand. All right, so I'm dry off my brush so that my brush is good for absorbing, and just get rid of all of this excess. So, and like I said, I'm a complete beginner. I'm not going to claim to be any professional. I'm trying to figure out if these lessons or doing these exercises helps my painting and hopefully help you out. But that looks pretty darn good to me. So, all right, we'll try next one. Same thing, same paint, different technique. I've left 2 places marked so I can easily get my paper where I want it to go. I'm looking for wet to wet. Wet front to page. So this is trying to keep the page from buckling so much. Probably a little too wet. So I'll pull up some of that. So I'm getting the back of the page wet, which will of course make the paper cup in one direction. Get the other side wet. Now what's unfair about this is this should be done for the whole page. Like if you're painting with this technique, which I'm going to try. I think I like it. I found it from another person looking at stuff. It looks very intriguing. It looks like a really good idea because it gives you more time to work the paper and it gives you less buckling because the page should pretty much stay where you want it to stay. Now you can see for doing a wash, well maybe you can't see, but for doing a wash it's currently not ideal because this edge and this edge are sort of pulling up from the board. So let's see if we can get them down, tape them down. And I'm already getting a little buckling, which could be expected. All right, so into it we go. Same pigment, same color, basically same intensity. It will come out less. This shouldn't be so concerning about keeping everything consistent and moving because it's wet on wet. Wet's a little more forgiving than dry, right? When you're moving on dry paper, it sucks a lot of the pigment up and exactly where you are. So meaning wherever you put the brush to the page, it sucks it right up. So initially this isn't looking too bad. I'm going to dry out the brush and pull up some of the edge paint so that doesn't get in there. Hopefully we don't have the same problem I had on another wash, which is the paint running underneath. But you can see, or at least I can see, this is higher here than here, so it's starting already to sort of run into the valleys. And obviously I can lift some of the paint in the valleys, but it's not ideal in my opinion, right? Because it's you've got to sit here and babysit this wash to some level. Oops. You can almost see some, so I'm just touching a little pigment paint onto my brush. So it feels a little light right here. To me, it looks a little light. Should look through the camera. It is, even in the camera. Camera gives you, believe it or not, a little better contrast and understanding of what's going on. I'm trying to be careful not to pick up too much pigment. If I take too much pigment and put it into this area, then, you know, we're done. That's about as far as I dare go. Okay, so not bad, not great. Put the brush down, turn off the cameras, move to the last one. All right, let's try the last one. So now this, let's try to clean off the brush. There we go. This is pre-stretched paper, so it shouldn't buckle as much. And I've really found that to be the case. So I'm just gonna wet down the whole area. And I'm getting it good and wet, but not sopping. Right, so I can see when I look from the side a really nice sheen to this. So the whole thing's wet. Make sure my brush has a certain amount of moisture on it. Yeah. Right. And off we go. This is going to be lighter even with the heavier pigment because it is a wet to wet. Right. And again, it should be a little forgiving because it is wet to wet, but you do have to keep it moving. You got to be consistent. So in my world, the first one didn't run that great. So I'm going to get a little stronger pigment and go over the whole thing. You can tell when the brush starts running out of pigment. You can see when the brush starts running out of pigment. Okay. I'm going to pick the edges up. And I don't know if you could see that, but I went over the tape into the paper a little bit. And it definitely picked up a little of the paint on the edge. So if this was going to be, you know, I have not done a painting where this would be, I would tape, right? And that's kind of these little stripes are not something I would typically do in a painting. Maybe some people do. I haven't seen it yet. Okay, and it feels like it is coming, it feels like the tape is being bad to me again. And it's pulling paint into the edge. So just pulling up some of that. The one place that it's really obvious that there's a problem is, imagine this, a dog hair. Or some kind of, it looks like a dog hair. Okay. You want to try to make sure you do not have this problem. I didn't think I did have this problem, but you know, there you go. There. Well, that was fun. Sarcasm. So maybe I can pick up just a little bit. Still doing it here and here. Touch. I can see some spots of inconsistency, right? And if I want to get really, really fussy, I can start sitting here and playing with them a little bit. Because it's wet on wet, I have a little more opportunity to play and load places that it looks like it went a little light. Right? Don't want to go too far. But it's almost like you can see where I removed that hair. And there's something going on here with the paper. Okay. Again, it's a bit of babysitting to try to get something. It wasn't bad to begin with, and maybe I should just leave it. Right? There's somebody I'm looking at online. Call him a teacher, because I think that's a fair thing to say. Somebody who's way more experienced than me, who says you gotta, at some point, you just gotta let it go. Leave it alone. And I think I'll take that advice and leave it alone right now and let everything dry, and we'll come back. All right, so conclusion. Let's make sure to use one. I'm going to use one camera, not go back and forth. No reason to see any painting. This is the pre-stretched. This one, which I did not on camera, not bad until where it got pulled by the tape here. This has moments that it's really nice, and it looks like the page pulled up, and it's funny, it's got a little bit of warpage to it, but it's high here. Makes sense, I guess, right? So not the best results, I'm just going to admit it. And I'm not sure if that's me or what. So this was off camera. This is wet on wet. So the wet back, wet front. Right? That's not bad. I'd give this, well, here we can actually look at the two next to each other. Right? I'd give this okay. Not the worst thing in the world. But it does have a few places where it warped. And when that happens, you get these little low spots that get darker, right? And then there's the dry. And beyond something where it looks like there was a reaction to the tape, again, here. But for a flat wash, that seems to be the way to go. If you're trying to get a really consistent flat wash, tilting the board, dry, paper, run the paint quickly, top to bottom. Because this is consistent too on the other side. That's with light pigment, that's with darker pigment. Now you can see some texture, but that's texture coming in because this is a cold press paper. It's not texture of this being a problem, right? It's, I'm gonna look, but it's really texture from the paper. So there you go. My 2 cents. How do you do it? And which one's better? For somebody who's not an expert, this seems better. The other piece, because this whole channel is supposed to be about, does this do you any good? Learning flat washes. It's definitely worth doing. It's technically difficult, which starts to teach you water control and speed as well, and not getting too attached to anything and moving quickly on the page. I'm looking forward to figuring out where I can integrate this into, right? One of the next, these open spots are going to be me playing with gradients, like going from dark to light, going from one color to another color. So I've got that coming up in another future video, and that's something I'm interested in playing with too. All right, thanks. Hopefully everyone's enjoying this, and see you the next time.